There's a pattern I see in some people who have struggled a lot to form happy romantic relationships. Some people, probably driven by past trauma, go kind of unconscious and miss the red flags and don't know how they feel and get swept up into whatever the other person is dishing out, even if it's not very good. But there's this other opposite kind of partner where a person gets hyper-conscious. They read all the right books, they get into self-help, they do all the therapy, they adopt the jargon, as if there's a way that you could just be good enough and do it all like you're supposed to do. And then you can say, see, this is a healthy relationship. And of course, I'm all for healthy relationships, but there's this element of perfectionism and control that creeps in. And sometimes that can actually block you from your true feelings and from your honest response to another person. And it can bring out parts of you that can undermine the growth of love. My letter today is from someone I'll call Chris, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. I've been watching your videos and using the daily practice for about 6 months now. Yay. I've also been working on reparenting myself for about a year after a really painful relationship where I completely abandoned myself and destroyed my self-esteem, chasing after a guy who was emotionally unavailable. This was actually the first relationship I've had where I chased someone. Before that, I'd been avoidant for most of my romantic life. I've got the fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things that I want to come back to in a second reading, but right now I'll just read through Chris's letter so we can get the idea of what's happening. Okay. This is the first time I've chased someone. I used to be avoidant because this was probably because my first relationship ended up being an abusive marriage with an alcoholic. When I left, I swung from codependent to counterdependent and stayed that way for about 7 years. But for some reason, this last relationship brought all my codependent tendencies back with a vengeance. I do remember starting to see him and telling myself and others and him that I was done being fiercely independent and that I was ready to practice healthy interdependence. But I don't know that I had a clear picture of what that was actually supposed to look like, which is why I'm writing today. I definitely don't want to repeat old patterns anymore. After taking about a year away from dating, returning to therapy, getting coaching, doing attachment style work, getting into Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, and developing a spiritual practice that helps me stay more grounded and centered, I've started dating a guy again. We're moving pretty slow, and that feels great so far. We started off seeing each other once a week and texting back and forth about once a day, not every single day. It's been about a month since then, so we're right at 8 weeks. We finally had sex for the first time a couple days ago, and it was great. A few days before we actually had sex, I'd brought it up and told him I felt comfortable with him and trusted both myself and him enough to go for it. I also told him that it might be triggering to me if we had sex and he immediately left. So I asked him if we could do it on a night when he was available to sleep over. This was also our first time doing a sleepover. It felt really great. Overall, I think the relationship is going well. On paper, he checks every box I could ever dream up, and then some. When we were together, he's engaging, present, and emotionally available. We've talked about our goals, our fears, our pasts, and just things we're working on in general. He's sober, as am I. He's handled vulnerable things I've shared really well. An example, I told him I felt like he's more intellectual than I am, and he responded by saying, I get where you're getting that from, but I don't feel comfortable with that, and I think you're being hard on yourself. But I'm also worried I'm crap-fitting because maybe my avoidant side just learned more psychological terms in the last year. Here's the situation I keep wrestling with. Although he's really easy to connect to in person, he can be more distant than I like the rest of the time. He's not the best at texting back, although it's nothing egregious. It'll be a few hours between responses a lot of the time, even when I know he's not busy. Likewise, if I sit back and let him reach out, it can be close to 2 full days before I hear anything from him. I know people aren't necessarily available just because they're not occupied, so I haven't criticized him or even really brought it up with him. It's brought up some anxiety for me, and I have mentioned this to him, although every time I've brought it up, it's after I've already sat with the anxiety and processed it and worked on addressing it within myself. Doing the, okay, where is this coming from? What do I need? How do I meet that need? What stories am I telling myself? Thing first, usually for a couple of days before I eventually say, this is something I felt and have dealt with subtext, and I feel comfortable expressing it now that I don't have to ask for anything from you. Because I'm still learning how to trust myself. What does this sound like? Is this crap fitting? Is this forcing myself to become more comfortable with someone who doesn't meet my needs automatically? Is this my learning to adjust to a world where things won't always go my way? Is this me learning to feel my feelings, or am I shutting down an even bigger feeling of unworthiness to get my needs met by psychologizing myself into defaulting into an assumption that I'm being unreasonable when my expectations for contact aren't even all that high? I guess technically the answer to all these questions is simply yes. What's the more in-depth answer? Where do we draw the line between crap fitting and letting ourselves feel uncomfortable enough to grow? Reading back over all of this, it really feels like I'm overthinking this into the ground, but I cannot bring myself to see what seems like it should be super obvious. What am I hiding from myself? Thank you for all you do. Chris. Okay. All right. Thank you, Chris. I think I can help. Yeah, the questions you're asking yourself are good ones, but you're kind of, I see like this huge blind spot where the truth is, all right? Do you want me to cut to the chase and tell you what it was? You were not ready for sex. You were not ready, and you're trying to talk yourself through all this psychological jargon into why it feels this way, and we did all this thing in 8 weeks exactly, and you cannot plan for the complexity of the soul. You can't plan for it, you can't control it, and in your case, what your insecurity is telling you, and especially because of the sort of past things that you've been through, what it's telling you is you don't feel good. It does not feel this, a guy who will wait a couple days to call you. No, there's no problem with that, except it's you and you're sleeping with him. And, this is what my Catholic friends call lying with your body, where it feels like a promise has been made to you to be together, to care about your feelings, to be responsive to you, to be in your life. It feels like it because of sex, but there's not really that agreement on the surface. And what you're doing is you're crap fitting yourself to the common social idea that people are just supposed to be cool with this. You're being cool, girl. And do you watch videos where I talk about cool girl? Cool girl is like, I can totally have sex, and then I don't need stuff from you except when I express my needs in psychological jargon. What I feel missing in this is you, Chris. I can't feel you in all of this. Like, you've talked yourself into all this stuff, and you said it. You said, am I doing this because I've just learned more psychological terms? Yes. And you're using those as a shield. And what I sense about you is that you're really scared that you just don't know what to do or how to do this. And I also hear that you don't believe that your sensitive soul is a real thing, and that you actually need love, that sex for you comes in a context of a loving mutual thing. It's not like you can't just sort of like create little agreements and then it's all great. That doesn't work for you. You may hear that from other people and it works for them, but with CPTSD, and especially with abandonment wounds, and especially with, like, you're sober, that process of getting honest, getting rigorously honest about what's really going on. And I just want to give you permission to feel how you feel and not have to psychologize it and not have to try to explain it away. It's just how you feel. This is not a criticism, but everything that you described here, and it's just a letter, it's not like really your life, so I have to interpret it, but it all sounded like you were following a script, and it was a script and it wasn't your actual heartfelt feelings. First relationship was an abusive marriage with an alcoholic. That's major. Okay, so there's a thing there. You have a wound there that would get you into that marriage in the first place, and now you're out of it, but you're kind of still doing it. You're shutting yourself down to make something work. You say all this stuff about healthy interdependence, codependent, counterdependence. I don't know, label it how you will. It's just what it is. It's just what it is, that you have an idea of how you're supposed to be, that you shouldn't have these feelings you have. Where you desire for there to be like a super safe, committed love before you do this. And by commitment, I mean, like, yeah, he does text you every day, whether you text him or not, that he cares about you, that he wants to be in your life, that you want your relationship to be a lot more progressed than it already is. 8 weeks couldn't possibly bring you to that state, no matter whose guidebook says, at 8 weeks, it's okay. I know some people say 90 dates or 30 days or 1 year no dating, like you could use anybody else's standards, but you need the Chris standard. And the Chris standard it just isn't where you need for that deep safety and open-heartedness that you would like to have. Now, you notice what I'm avoiding is saying needs. I think the language of psychology always talks about, and then it has to meet my needs. And I would just say, try this, okay? Just don't use that word needs. You don't actually need a relationship. Getting your needs met is something that you do and your higher power. You and your higher power get your needs met, and you have food, you have a roof over your head, you have air, you have water, you have some basic support in your meetings, okay? Your needs are met. Your needs are already met. So what this is about how you want to let somebody into your life and what sort of thing feels like a real relationship to you. Their role isn't to meet your needs, and they don't get criticized for not meeting your needs. I'm just try out this way of looking things. This is how I see it. I used to hear that language of, you don't meet my needs. Actually, being married now, it's so not like that. Like we are very generous with each other. Sometimes we're stingy with each other and it creates problems, emotionally stingy, but we're very generous with each other. But this thing about I demand you meet my needs or you are rejected. Well, if you're in that situation, you've gone too fast. That's all. You've gone too fast. I think you do have a need for emotional safety for you to have a sexual relationship. That's your need. He doesn't meet that need. You meet that need. You meet that need by not rushing in and talking yourself in with jargon into going, actually, this is okay because it ticks all the boxes. And I think you know that. I'm not trying to put it down. I think you said it yourself, but you're sort of like, is that really right? And I think you've got it right. So this guy may have the potential to be really into you and committed to you, but I think right now, and I'm saying this in every video lately, don't forget, he has a nervous system, you have a nervous system. So no matter what kind of perfect language you use about I have an expectation, counterdependence, needs met, all that stuff, no matter what your mouth says, your nervous system is communicating a lot of stress and direness, and he's going to feel it. And eventually the texting dynamic and you letting him know how upset you are 8 weeks into a relationship with how much he texts you, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. It usually leads to the end of a relationship, and it's a harbinger of a relationship that's not really good right now. That's what it is. If you can slow your relationships down, just postpone sexuality. That's where you notice you were really doing great here until that happened. It was a couple days ago, and now you're just that's what happens. You probably heard this. I heard this in 12-step meetings. Relationships are like pouring Miracle Grow on your character defects. It brings out your worst insecurities, and for a reason. It's not because you're defective. It's because sexuality is part of that true self, that deep connection, love, life formation, family formation process. That's part of that. So if you have to shut that down and dumb yourself down and lie to yourself that is natural for you to desire and want, there's just no way this turns out well for you. Either you end up zombifying yourself to crap fit the whole situation. See, I don't think he's crap fitting you. I think you're crap fitting you. And I just wonder what would happen if it is hard to go back. Once you've started having a sexual relationship, it always feels like rejection to the other person or control or something. To just say, I'm kind of in over my head here. This brings up a lot of feelings that, don't fit our relationship right now. I want to get to know you. And I would just say, try the crappy childhood fairy method. Go much slower than this, much slower. You shouldn't have to negotiate that he would be there for you. When you say, it would be triggering for you if you had sex and he wasn't spending the night, and you talk about it like you're negotiating this psychological thing, there's this weird way that gives me a sick feeling, because that's not like a trigger. That's because it's demeaning. It's just totally demeaning for you to be really into somebody and to, just give yourself to somebody like that. And it's just good night, I'm going home now. No. There's a reason that feels like crap. Because it is crap. It's crap, okay? That may, people who have casual sex may do that, but that's not, of course you want somebody with you. Just be honest about who you really are. Just be with who you really are, and don't call it a need. Just call it, how it has to be. Just what it is for you, how you really feel, your truth. It's just true for you. It's not anybody else's job to, fit your truth. It's your job to proceed slowly until what you know to be true about yourself, matches well with what's happening with somebody else. And that's not what's happening right now. He's sort of doing you've agreed not to see other people, but he's keeping it light. And I actually think like 8 weeks into dating, seeing each other twice a week is plenty. In my structured dating that I teach people, and by the way, it sounds like you've never taken my dating course. And I have a course for people like us, and it's so great because it helps you get very clear about what you want in a relationship and in your life, and then to identify all the ways that you've sold yourself short through magical thinking and crap fitting and adhering to trauma-driven beliefs about things. So you start identifying all that, and then I teach you how to do structured dating. And in structured dating, you get to set your own timelines and stuff, but for somebody like you, 8 weeks it's way too soon. It's just way too soon. Now, something that a lot of people say to me when I teach them this, they go, well, there's nobody out there who would wait 8 weeks. And I'm just like, well, when you are in the mindset that rushing into things is how it has to be, that's who you're going to find. But trust me, there are many, many people out there who are on board with the same ideals. They've had the same struggles before. They have the same ideals. They would like to go slowly too, because it only is common sense that if your life is going to, if your emotions, your attachment wounds and all that stuff is going to get triggered, it's just not safe to open Pandora's box like that with somebody you can't count on. So you develop that kind of relationship first. It's called courtship. Your grandparents and great-grandparents did it. And you get to know somebody, and you get to know if they're a good partner for you. And you rethink. Dating is not having sex with somebody and seeing if it sticks. It's getting to know somebody and seeing if it's the right person for you to go to the next level with, level after level. And you have to know yourself first. Whether it's, SLAA or whatever method you're following here, you can't fit yourself to anybody else. It's helpful to learn how other people do it, but then you must decide what's true for you and honor that. You're the person who honors that. When you honor yourself, you only let in people who match that, and then there's not this big negotiation of like, now you've dishonored me, you have to turn into somebody you're not. That's how it works. We're retrofitting people who we let in too soon. He's not in a place that's going to work for you right now. Doesn't mean you have to end this relationship. I'm sure you fear he'll leave if you now set this boundary that it's too soon for sex. So just do with that what you will. If you're thinking about it, try my daily practice. This is where you can language out, process out all those fearful thoughts and about it, right or wrong, true or false, fair or not fair. It all goes out of your mind and onto the paper, and there's less to deal with. And it's not imposing any kind of structure on you about what you're supposed to believe. You're not labeling anything. You're just getting your own troubled thoughts out on paper and either releasing them, or if you have a higher power, which you probably do if you're sober, you ask your higher power to take it from you. You rest in meditation and you start to become more informed. I'm telling you, healing is so much about becoming who you really are. And sometimes other people's map, my map, the Gottman map, these maps of, John Bradshaw, 12-step programs, these are maps. Maps are great when you're brand new at recovery, but if you're coming along, you've got some of the basics taken care of, and especially with relationships, it is so important that you are becoming who you really are, and you are honoring who you really are, and you can stop putting that demand on people or that tension or that negotiation. It's like, this isn't meeting my needs. You change. And without ever being honest about like, I feel terrible. I feel like you don't love me. That's like, I would not want to have a intimate relationship with anybody if I couldn't tell them truly what was going on. If that was going to threaten the relationship, then it's not an intimate relationship. So I'm just trying to put before you like a different standard than what everybody else has out there. Your attachment wounds, what you've been through with an abusive ex who was an alcoholic, all that you've been through, like, you get to be like totally true to yourself. And it's in there. You know what to do. You do know what to do if you stop talking yourself out of it. So I use the daily practice for no longer talking myself out of what is actually true for me. Then I don't expect anybody to meet my needs. And things go so much better, where people are generous with me and kind and loving to me. And I'm so much more secure in my relationships all around because that weird transactional meet my needs idea is not in there. I meet my needs together with my higher power. And when at the point where you get married, Marriage is a service position. Marriage is hopefully a mutual service position, but it's not all about getting your needs met out of somebody. It's about, getting together and committing to each other to bring out the best in each other, to support each other, to become all you can be. And that way, it's not therapy. It's it's a totally different context. And when you're with somebody where you have that safety together, where you both really have that motivation authentically, you don't have to demand it from the other person. When you have that, amazing things happen because you become more than the two individuals, like together you bring out the best in each other. So I hope that happens for you. It sounds like it is your heart's desire for that to happen. I know some of you really don't desire partnership or marriage, but this is information for people who do. And if you love this topic, I've got a video lined up about how accepting crumbs in relationships, which is a little what you're doing, is a survival strategy you learned in childhood. Something you have to unlearn now, but you can understand why you have it. And that video is right here, and I will see you very soon.